Hey everybody, welcome to Maine Wedding Buzz, and today I'm excited to have Diane York from Diane York Weddings, and we're going to talk a little bit about wedding planning and how to do it in the state of Maine and making this your destination location. Thank you, Diane, for coming on the show.
My pleasure, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, I started about 12 years ago, 13 actually now, as a coordinator at Woodford's Church for coordinating the weddings there because the people working at the church did not want to work on Saturdays, and I didn't mind. And so after doing that for about a year and a half, I thought, well, I could do this and be a wedding planner. But for many, many years, for all kinds of different organizations, did planning of anything from a fashion show to dinners for theater, Portland Players, Portland Symphony, Portland Stage. In fact, anything that had Portland in it, I was probably working. So for about 40 years, I've been planning stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then that takes me to a question I had here. So weddings aren't the only thing that you plan. So you do other things other than weddings.
Yes.
So which do you like better, the weddings, corporate, or social?
Well, I like doing corporate, but I really like doing weddings, and it's now become my trademark. So I would have to say that right now it's weddings and everything that's associated with a wedding. More and more, Maine is a destination, and so we are doing the welcome party the night before, and very often we'll do a wedding breakfast, a post-wedding breakfast as well. So for one weekend, it could be 3, sometimes 4 different
Events going on.
That we're planning. This year I have a hermit crab race that is taking place, which is kind of fun. Yeah.
What's your favorite type of event outside of a wedding to plan? I mean, do you have one that you just go, wow, I really love doing this kind of event?
Well, I think...
Well, event design too, so I like to put that in there.
I don't do a lot of event design. I do rely on the clients to give me their vision, and then I work with people that do the design
and execute the idea.
And execute it. And of course, I always rely on the caterers who do the wonderful job of setting everything up. So as soon as we decide on a venue, then we decide on the caterer, and that's when we start working together with the designer.
And how many events do you do per year?
It varies. I have done as many as 22, which for one person is a tremendous amount. But I would say probably 15, 16 is a good number.
So do you do one event a weekend? Is that how that works for your company? It
depends. I do a variety of different services, and one of the things that I like to do a lot is the elopement packages, which I do Tuesday through Thursday, which is very nice because that then
and have become very popular.
Yes, and also it's just 2 people, and it's really nice to deal with 2 people. However, having said that, the groundwork for 2 people is the same as you do for 200 people, because you still have to make the same number of calls for each of the different vendors that are involved.
Now, are you an officiant too?
I am.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, last weekend I married 3 couples from out of state. They happened to be from the LGBT community.
Which you do a lot of work for that, and you are very supportive of the group. So,
oh yes, very supportive. And but I'm working with 3 clients right now that are going to use my elopement packages, and it will just be the couple themselves, and we do a little tiny cake, and I do the accommodations, I get the photographer, and everything that actually goes into a full wedding but for a much
Smaller
smaller
number.
group.
And it's funny, isn't it sometimes a little bit harder? You talked about that 2 is just sometimes as hard as 150.
Absolutely. All of the components that go into planning for a large number, actually, that's up to the other vendors. That is up to the caterer. It's up to the venue. But my involvement is the same, whether it's 2 people or 200.
Wow, that's incredible. How far in advance should clients book you, as a planner or as an officiant? I'm going to do both. So
Well, surprisingly, and I think this is a generational thing, I've noticed this in the last 5 years, but especially in the last 3 years, people are saying, oh, let's get married. And so the planning time ideally is anywhere from 9 months to 18 months. The average, I would say, is about 7 or 8 months now.
Wow.
It's getting closer. And it's all the internet. You know, people see what they want on the internet. And
everything's out there anymore. You don't have...
Exactly. So they just think that it's as instant as it is. Unfortunately, in the state of Maine, we have a lot of wonderful, wonderful venues that are seasonal. So, if you don't get in, you have to get in very, very quickly. You have to get in early to find out if the place is available. But also, you have to remember that the people who are working seasonally are not always there to answer your questions. And that's where somebody like me comes in, because that's what I do. I constantly am calling and calling until I find the person that we need, whereas it can be very frustrating for clients to come from out of state and then have to try to get people when they're working and the person is not there to answer their
Especially if there's
questions.
time differences, like from California to Maine,
Absolutely.
so you're working with that as
Yes,
well.
yes.
So, you know, because when we work, we do, in January, February, March, April, we work a year in advance. Does the same thing work with planners? Do you work
Absolutely.
the same
Yes.
way, like booking 2016, and then when 2016 comes, you're working on 2017?
Yeah, well, it's not quite as dramatic as that for me, because I'm one person. But most definitely, the time from, say, Thanksgiving to what is the famous day?
Valentines?
Valentines.
Yep.
Thank you. Went out of my mind for a moment. But in that period, I call that my intake.
Okay,
period.
so you get the most calls from Valentine's to November.
Yes,
Oh, that's interesting.
most definitely. Those are the big engagement
Yeah.
times. And even if the client doesn't book with me, that's when they're doing their...
You're cold calling, all of that stuff.
all
and
the
so-
cold calling,
Wow.
exactly.
So when what does your event planning services include? So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then what the officiant part of it. Because I love the fact that
Yes.
you're both, because
Yes.
you can handle all of it. So if I were calling you, you have a list on your website, but do you customize everything? If I want this, this, and this from certain packages, can you do that for me as well?
I do. Everything is set out on my website, all of everything that I offer. I used to do a lot of day of, what is called day of. That is a misnomer, because there's no such thing as a day of. My day of starts at least 6 weeks to 2 months ahead of time, ahead of the event, because you have to be, you know, in sync with what the other
What the client
vendors are
wants, yeah.
doing, as well as what the client wants. And so I would say that usually I go year to year. At this time of year, I will start getting people for next year. So for me, I would say my next year people will start anywhere between June and September.
Okay. Where's the first part that somebody starts with planning a wedding with you as the planner? Like, do they say, okay, is it venue? Is it the officiant? Is it photography, catering? What's the first part that they come to you?
For me, it's usually the area. Do they want, because they'll say they want to get married in Maine. Well, we know that Maine has 300 miles of coastline. Where in Maine? Do you want an urban wedding? Are you more, would you be happier and would your guests be happier? Keeping in mind that it's probably going to be a 3-day weekend, would they be happy in an urban setting? Would they like to have a beach setting? Do they want to do kayaking and that kind of thing? Fortunately, in Portland, Maine, we have the opportunity to offer all of that in one city. But I would have to say that, first of all, it's the area of Maine, and then it's the venue.
Okay.
Most definitely.
So then you really help navigate them to a specific venue. So when they
Yes.
call, and you know, somebody's calling from California, has never been to Maine, but has camped here, which is interesting because I'll get calls and they've camped here or gone to summer camp.
Family is here.
Exactly, and so
Yes.
they've vacationed here once and fell in love with it, which we love. Could keep coming to Maine. So you just basically navigate them to what they're, from listening to them and
Yes.
understanding what their vision is.
Yes, and first of all, of course, a very important thing to know is what their budget is. And I've learned to not say what is your budget, because very few people have any idea at all of what their budget is. So now I'm saying, you've given me your vision and I know where you'd like to be. What kind of investment would you like to make in that in a location such as that? And then very often, if they can't give me an answer to that, I'll say, well, let's look at this, from a very practical standpoint. You know what you earn. You know what your fiance earns. What are your parents going to contribute to this? And then I just go. Then I'll ask them, if you're going out for a very, very nice dinner, just the two of you, you're going to get dressed up and you're going to a fancy restaurant and you're going to have drinks and a lovely meal, what would you expect to pay for that? And they'll usually say, $120, I don't know, depending on the area or the city. And I'll say, well, times that by 150 people.
Exactly.
And that will give you a good idea of what you're going to spend. You're not going to do a wedding that you've just described for $35 to $50 a head.
Which is interesting, because when these magazines come out, all the magazines that are out now on the newsstands, which there's an enormous amount of wedding magazines out there, it's always interesting to me that these articles are written about how to save money or how to negotiate with your vendors. And it's really hard, because I always tell people sometimes you pay for what you get, but at the end of the day, this isn't a business where you should barter. This is a once in a lifetime. There are no redos. So I always find it fascinating that the editors of these magazines put a 20-year-old, which I know they have to start somewhere, but they're writing these articles without actually going back and listening to the caterers, the photographers, the officiants, the planners, and saying, hey, how do you negotiate or how do you navigate through these questions that brides are asking? And they write these, go to your caterer and barter, or go to your officiant and barter, or your planner and barter. And we're hearing more and more of that. Are you finding that in the wedding planning business as well?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I get a little offended when I'm asked, can you do a better deal? TheKnot.com, I think, started this whole thing, and perhaps other publications gave people the idea that you can barter with clients. I say, you're coming to Maine, you are going to be dealing with the best people in the country to give you all of these wonderful things that you would like to have, but a wedding is a one-off. You are not going to get any deals. The only time it is sometimes a good idea to work with one caterer, if you're going to have a whole weekend, especially if you're going to set up for the rehearsal dinner the night before, have that rehearsal dinner in the same place. You've got the same chairs, you've got the same tables, you've got the same...
and if it has a dishwashing system, you can use the same china and silverware as long as there's a dishwasher there, you're good.
Exactly. And you're also working with one caterer that now knows the venue, and you've got smooth sailing from there on.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I do think that it's what people listen to on the internet and things that they can find on different websites. I should not have probably mentioned that last one. But anyway, I think that it's not doing the client or our customers a service, because they may feel that they're not getting the best deal. I would say that if you come to Maine, you're going to be dealing with a lot of really first-class people.
And how long from start to finish does it take to plan for the big day? So if they call you in January and the wedding is in June, do you spend from January to June with them, or is there like a timeline that you put together?
Well, usually once I've done the initial planning, then there will be maybe 4 or 5 weeks that, or maybe 2 months.
Okay.
That
just depends on the...
It depends on how long we've been working together. For example, I've been working with a customer from New York. We've been working together since September of last year.
Oh, wow.
And so I haven't spoken to them in probably... We do have a meeting tomorrow morning, a phone meeting, but very often they'll say, is there something I should be doing? I say, everything is done, everything is in place, enjoy this time, because 5 or 6 weeks from the wedding, that's when we get into
the busy
full
time.
Steam again.
And how far do you travel?
Well, I'll go anywhere in Maine. Of course, the further I travel means that I very often will have to be put up for the night before and probably the night after the wedding.
Excellent. And do you have a favorite venue to work at? And I know we're going to see some of it on the screen here.
Oh, a favorite venue for me is when, so this was actually a private home, but a favorite venue, of course, is when somebody says, we just want to show up.
You got to love those.
And that was and that was just lovely.
I love the raw bar. I think it's beautiful out of the boat.
The raw bar, and that was another a Portland caterer. And you can buy a dinghy. You can have one of those.
Nice. More to my prop department, right? So I think they're gonna pop some more up here, and this is beautiful. This one is just
yes. And this is actually a private home. Yes, on Pratt's Island.
Beautiful ring.
Yes, yes. It's sort of your postage-sized diamond.
Beautiful.
Always a plus. And
so the coupe diamond, isn't that what Elizabeth Taylor had from Burton? So
yes,
that's stunning. Tell us a little bit about this table, because you were telling me a little bit about that.
Normally, I will, when I'm working with wedding planners and designers, I will work with probably 7 or 8 different vendors. On this particular wedding, we had 22 vendors.
Wow.
It was absolutely amazing. The table linens that you can see were sort of a silk, and they were all custom made.
Wow.
Everything was completely handmade, and it was just a beautiful
Was it
look.
a specialty linen company, or are you allowed to talk about where the linens came from? Or?
Yes, and the name escapes me now, but it was a Boston company.
BBJ Linens, or was it Cloth Connections?
No. It'll come.
Yeah, no problem. They're beautiful. I love the sash. It almost feels like...
Yes, and what we did, when we arrived at this venue, speaking of design, they had the most beautiful patios all around the property, and they were gray and purple and green
Oh, wow.
in the stones, and that's where we picked
up
up
the colors.
all of the colors. And then with regards to the flowers, the bride said, I want flowers, flowers, flowers everywhere. And so this was it was an 8 acre lot, but it was all on ledge, so it was very, very difficult for us to put up the tents. So we had 2 tents. Behind this tent there was another tent where they picked up all of the food, and then for another one, I think you might see an image of this in a moment.
Coming up next, yeah.
Coming up
So
next.
I think they're going to pop up another one for us there.
Yes.
So this is one of the ledges
Yes,
that you were talking
this was outside on one of the patios, and you can see, you can't really see the color of the flagstones, but they had this beautiful purple and green and gray. And then going to the next image, this was the 3rd tent
Oh, wow.
that we had that we
For dancing and
yes,
music.
and we designed this to look like a lounge for our very famous entertainer that we
Very
had.
nice, very nice.
Yes,
I love the way they drape the ceiling too.
Yes,
Very beautiful.
it is. It's lovely, and I
And the
can.
backdrop of the piano.
Yes, and
everything.
this was all done by Moonlighting and One Stop Party Rentals.
Oh,
which
wow. Beautiful.
yes.
And I love that the chairs for the lounge area where the dancing and everything was going to occur, because I'm going to assume these are little couches. You used chivaris for in here
Yes.
and different chairs, so it completely almost created different vignettes for both.
Oh, absolutely.
The dinner.
Yes,
I like that.
and that was the reason when the client walked into this room, because I said, you're not going to like this. We have to put up another tent. He said, okay. That was it. I said, all right. And so when he walked into this, they had just completed the lighting set for it. And he walked in, and he and his fiancée said, wow.
Yeah. And when you get that, it makes you feel
When you
good.
get that wow, you think, well, this is worth all of the people. And I say I worked with 22 vendors. Each of those vendors brought in about anywhere between 10 and 15 people.
Wow. So it was a full crew.
So it was absolutely amazing.
And to look on her website too for more of those photos, and too we'll have some at the end. And do you work with other? Speaking of vendors, you work with obviously a lot of vendors on your referral network. So
Yes.
do you do a lot of the referral? Do you do back and forth? Are you on other people's vendor pages? How does that work?
I am, and I'm always honored when I have a referral from another vendor, because we're the ones in the trenches. We're the ones, it doesn't matter what the guests are seeing. Of course, we always hope that it's an absolutely amazing experience for them too. But we always, we know what sometimes we have to do backstage before anybody sees it.
And it's interesting that you say that, because there was a lot of times when you have, I did an event in Portland last year, and I got to the venue at 7 in the morning, and power went out all the way down Commercial Street.
Oh my.
And I'm just kept working, and I'm like, we're gonna try and get the power back on, and everybody was out, and we just kept working as if the party was going on. Party
Yeah.
wasn't till 5 o'clock. Power had to be brought in for the bathroom to put that. No power yet, and none of the guests actually know all the stuff that we have to do behind to make sure
That's
that
right.
everything happens well, and we can't sit there and panic. About 7 o'clock, the power went on. So from 6 to 7 during cocktail hour, nobody was the wiser. At 7, the power went back on. But we had generators for the kitchen and generators to run the bathrooms.
Yes.
And so we lucked out that by 7, by the time dinner was being served, power was back on, the band was playing, and
Yeah.
nobody was the wiser.
And speaking of generators, these are the sorts of things that when a client says, I want to have a tent and I want it close to the beach. Okay, how are we getting power to all of those places? And so it's always difficult to try to explain sometimes. You need generators. Generators cost money. This is all part of the planning. And nobody, I can promise you, nobody comes to a venue or a beautifully decorated tent and says, I love your generators. It doesn't
Exactly.
happen. But it's all a part of the cost that very often clients don't think of.
Exactly. And some locations also need kitchens that don't have kitchens, and so
Well,
that's another.
that's another thing when I'm working with clients that they want a tent, and I say, just keep this in mind. You are building a restaurant and a kitchen for one day.
Mm-hmm.
All of that stuff has to be brought in. All of those people have to be paid. And another thing that very often clients don't think about is, well, yes, they'll pay for the food, they pay for the drink, they pay for the flowers. They have to pay for labor as well. And labor is not inexpensive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree with you. How do you find your inspiration?
Well, let's say generally it comes from my client, most definitely. Pinterest, of course, is so huge, but it's a blessing and a curse.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
And I really prefer to work when I'm speaking of inspiration. I get the ideas from the client and then will speak to the either a designer, if they're bringing in a designer, or most often, and more nowadays, caterers also have the design team. And of course, a florist will always have a design team.
Yep.
And over the years, I've built a relationship with some of the best vendors in the area, and they're very happy to be a part of my team, which and I reciprocate.
Nice.
So it's you know, we all work together. The bottom line is this is not about us. This is all about the clients and the bride and groom on that day.
And speaking of Pinterest, do you Pinterest? Do you Facebook, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff that now social media has become so?
Yes.
I mean, it's part of the generation now that if you're not doing it, you're missing the boat.
Yes.
But it's interesting, if you go back 26 years ago when I first started in this industry, you know, the client would come to me with these big binders full of pictures that
Yes.
they'd rip out of a magazine.
Exactly.
And that was my Pinterest back
Yes,
then, and
of
now
course.
it's right
there. And
there.
of course it still is. And I still say to clients, I'm working with a young woman right now, and speaking about the time, she called me a month ago with a date.
Wow.
22nd of August, 2015. So I said, I can do this for you, but you're going to have to trust me. You are going to have to trust me with all of the vendors
And the decision
because I can go to these people and know that I'm going to get first-class service and at a really good price. And what was your question?
Well, do you make a lot of the choices for your clients?
Oh yes, I do.
Yeah.
I do. But what I do is before, you know, given that we have maybe 18 months to plan, I will give them in each category 3 or 4 vendors to choose from, people that I know, that I trust, that I've worked with before. I would like to say I never take a referral fee, never have, never will. My whole
I think that's phenomenal. I really do. I think that as vendors, there shouldn't be that obligation to pay anybody, and that's one thing I firmly believe, that we should never do referral fees to each other as vendors.
Yes.
I'm really happy that you don't do that.
As what I would like to think is that we have as good a relationship as possible, so that when I do refer somebody and that client, or that vendor is used for that event, then I would hope that they would say, oh, by the way, if you need a wedding planner or an officiant, you know, think of Diane York. And that has happened quite a few times over the years, I'm happy to say.
What's the biggest challenge you have faced as an event planner?
Oh, my goodness. I think it would have to be Hurricane Bill.
Wow.
Hurricane Bill, when we had a bride that was getting married in South Portland, right on the water with the tent. And the night before, of course, we had the tent in place the day before the event, and the night before, we were told that this storm was escalating into a hurricane. And so, fortunately, it was very close to another venue. This was in South Portland. I'm sure you know the venue. And the next morning, the tent was a complete wash. Everything that we had put on the ceiling was on the floor.
Oh, wow.
It just so happened that the parents of the bride and groom were an insurance agent and a lawyer. And I said to them, you have to come and see what I'm looking at. And I took the caterer as well. And we all agreed that this was an accident waiting to happen. And so in 5 hours, first of all, I spoke to the bride. And I said, we cannot have this out under a tent. And so she cried. And I said, what I want you to do is go back to your room at 1 o'clock, start your hair and makeup, just as if you were going to go under the tent. And in that time, we will move everything that was going to be in the tent into the building, which we did. And I'm happy to say that she was an absolutely exquisite bride. She walked down the stairs of this building, and I was at the top of the stairs. I may cry. And she said, I couldn't have wished for anything more beautiful. But that was probably the worst thing I ever had to deal with. And we did that in about 4.5 hours. We moved everything and decorated the inside as well.
Which would actually take me to the next question. Most rewarding and the proudest accomplishment, I would say that would be it. I mean, and also this big wedding.
Yes, it was. And I think what I love at the end of, and I have to say this because you're a wedding professional, and everybody that I work with is a wedding professional, but I'm the person that they see. Because by the time I get to the venue, my work is done. And then I'm just working with the band or the DJ who is making the announcements and the caterer. So I work with the kitchen and the band. But actually, my work is done. So I'm very visible. And it is very rewarding when people come up to me and say, oh, you're the wedding planner. What a great job you did. And I always say, I am nothing without the people behind the scenes that you're not seeing that are doing such an amazing job as well.
That's a really cool way to put it and to say it, to give everybody credit. How do you get the ball rolling with a client who calls? But here's an interesting thing. They'll call, I need a proposal today. I need it within 24 hours. And you get it to them, and now 3 months have gone by, and you're still waiting them to contact you back. Do you do a process like we do 3 emails, 3 phone calls? After that, if you don't call, we move on to the next person.
Pretty much that, because and I'm quite frank with them and say, do you want to do this yourself, or do you want somebody else to do it for you? In order to have somebody else do it for you, we have to contact a lot of people. And a lot of people have to say, yes, we're available or not. If I do all of that work and then wait and wait and wait, I will give a reminder just to say, if you have any more questions, let me know. If I don't hear back, I do not hammer myself over the head. It's just not worth it. I move on to the next one.
And I want to say the last thing. You just took on a really special project. Do you want to give it a little shout out about the book, or is that still under wraps?
Oh my goodness, no. Oh, thank you for mentioning that. A very dear friend of mine has written a book about his daughter who transgendered. And she came out when she was in her late 30s. She's now 50. And the reason for the book, I think, as far as the father was concerned, was it was mainly cathartic, because he wanted to understand this. He didn't, you know, it was very hard for him to understand. To him, he was losing his son. It was as though his son was dying, but he has gained a daughter.
Wow.
So the whole, the book, which is called Full Circle, Father's Journey with His Transgender Child, is about the love and compassion that they had from the day this child was born, even though she has now transitioned to her chosen gender. It is a story of love, compassion, understanding, and it happens very, very early in the book.
Wow.
Very, very early in life, excuse me. Everything that, in all of the research, I've been working on this for almost 2 years, and in all of the research that I've done, there are some elements that are extremely similar. The child knows of this when they're probably ages 3 to 5, somewhere in that. They recognize that they are
In the wrong body.
a different gender. They just do. And then prior to the internet, it was very, very difficult for people in that position to get any information. And this was the case with the book that I'm talking about. Nicole, formerly Nicholas, did not have access to the internet, and so she had contemplated suicide. All of the things that you hear about that are fortunately becoming very well known now because of the Bruce Jenner
story that's unfolding right
Yes.
now. And you're helping with the promotion?
And so I'm the publicist
Nice.
for this.
So you've taken on that role too through your business?
Yes, I've taken it on, but I have to say that Derry knew me, pardon me, we've known each other about 40 years. So we're dear friends, and it's just a pleasure to help him with this.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you for coming on. And
My
again,
pleasure.
if you need a wedding planner, Diane York is here to answer your questions. Give her a ring. You'll see more of her stuff at the end of the show, where to contact her, phone number, email, and website address will be on there. As always, thank you for joining Maine Wedding Buzz, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining.
Oh, my